I'm going to read a section from, actually, a new novel that came out in February called Deus Ex Machina, and it takes place behind the scenes of a reality television show that's facing cancellation after 12 very successful seasons. And it fits with the theme of escape in two ways, the first being that it takes place on a deserted island somewhere in the middle of the, which ocean is it? It's kind of near like the Philippines and Micronesia, sort of an undisclosed location, but very exotic. And the second reason is that if you spend any length of time watching reality television shows, of course, the thing you want to do most of all is escape. So yeah, it's the 12th season of this show called The Deserted, and the main character of the novel is the show's creator and producer, who goes unnamed through the novel. Deus Ex Machina. He's got a 5-bedroom house at the top of Laurel Canyon, a condo in Mumbai, and a 10% share in a tiny key east of St. Bart's. He's got a mint 58 Corvette and a limited edition Bentley, closets full of hand-stitched Italian suits, a home entertainment system that's triggered lawsuits. He's got private jets at his disposal and a wine cellar recently featured in GQ, but the producer's prized possessions are all rocks. He's collected them from every corner of the world: deserts, prairies, barrier reefs, pre-Columbian ruins, Pleistocene formations, catacombs, ice flows, varied in size, shape, and color, veined with metal or jutting with crystal. His rock collection is housed in a teak showcase that goes by contract wherever he goes, sitting like a monument in his private quarters. The quarters themselves are Spartan, a double-wide trailer with raised ceilings and hardwood floors, half of which is taken up by his meditation space. No one may enter without invitation. By standing order, the assistant producers may call the red phone only in case of nuclear war or act of God. Back in the day, he'd wait until week 7 and then bring some 20-year-old intern here, fuck her acrobatically on the hardwood floor while rain-scented mist shot from atomizers in the walls and hidden speakers played Tibetan chants recorded by his yoga teacher. But now he spends his off hours in the lotus position, sipping green tea and contemplating rocks. The one he keeps in his pocket is the newest addition to the collection, a reddish ovoid no bigger than a dog tag, cracked obliquely and speckled with shiny black chips. He found it one morning last spring on the northern edge of Puget Sound. He was sprinting barefoot on a secluded stony beach, the soles of his feet shredding, a blinding ecstasy of pain that shot up into his jaw and forced a high howl into his throat. Bleeding and exhausted, he stopped, needing something hard in his hand, needing to throw it with enough force to dislocate his shoulder. Arm cocked, he caught sight of an airplane, a glint at low altitude, banking toward distant Seattle, and stopped. The plane, silent and tiny, glided down through the sky. No more, the producer had said, panting a cold cloud. He knelt on the beach and let the pain diffuse through his body. This rock would mark the end of it, he decided, a symbol of his decision to leave the pain behind. He squeezed it until his hand throbbed and then slipped it in his pocket and limped back into the woods. Later in his tent, he would think about that airplane, how small and fragile it was, tilting on one wing, sliding silently back to the world. It was like the stone, heavy and solid, and just as likely to fall out of the sky and disappear in the dark water. All the people on board would be lost. It could not be predicted or edited, it would just happen. 5 weeks earlier, they'd found his wife's car at the bottom of a ravine in the Angeles National Forest. The car had burned, killing her and the man she'd left him for. Their bodies, bones and muscle, hair and nails, were fused into the upholstery and the springs. They'd had to identify them by their teeth. In the beginning, there was the idea, a passionate, if inchoate sense of purpose with which the producer and Armand, his mentor, descended from Armand's rooftop bar, ready to do battle with the network. They were armed only with a process message that, looking back, was audaciously vague. Viewers will see what it is like to be other people, it read. They will learn the truth of the human heart and mind. From idea to pitch, and then a string of meetings in which the suits were frankly uncomprehending, but intrigued. Free will, a concept of such beautiful simplicity no one quite knew how to discuss it. You chose the environment, dropped the unsuspecting players into it, and left them alone. No host, no gags, no idiotic games, and no intervention. It would be unpredictable, risky. That's what makes it real, Armand said. He had the bad taste to bring up Godard, which almost sank the whole meeting. But when they pointed out how much they'd save in casting, the suits raised their eyebrows and leaned back in their chairs. I lost my page. Oh yeah. When they pointed out how much they'd save in casting, the suits raised their eyebrows and leaned back in their chairs. We're thinking of calling it Abandoned, with an exclamation mark, the producer said. The suits frowned. We're not married to it, the producer said. 6 months later, they were in the Everglades, sweating their asses off, watching 10 exhausted strangers learn to hate each other. This was season 1 of The Deserted. A year later, there were licensed clones of the show in 8 countries. But now, after 12 seasons, their revolution is in trouble, their innovations passé. Once upon a time, people had wanted an unfiltered window into the lives of their fellow man and woman, a mirror held up to the world. Sure, that mirror had to be adjusted, the window tinted, a nudge here, an edit there to reel the story in. Reality, after all, is infinite and ever-changing. Television, on the other hand, is all too finite. You needed to schedule your spots with some degree of accuracy. But the idea had been sound. Now the market is flooded with crude gimmicks, ever more extravagant rewards. The mirror is warped beyond recognition. In its spare simplicity, the idea has come to seem priggish. How can the producer compete with shows about extreme sex reassignment, public transit sabotage, hunger strike competitions? A source in Burbank tells him the network is developing an ultimate fighting show for spouses with a history of domestic violence. Before such spectacle, such degradation, the producer feels helpless, a dinosaur. Even the blogs have turned against him. They've been given the green light for this new season, but everyone can sense a reckoning coming, a new paradigm taking shape, post-reality, though no one can yet say what that means. Listen up, people, says Walter Bernatelli, an ex-Marine and the group's self-declared leader. He tears a strip of denim from a pair of jeans and ties it around his head while the producer watches on the monitors in his private quarters. I know you're tired, Bernatelli says. I know it's been a tough day, but let me tell you something. The producer closes his eyes. When the going gets tough, he says. When the going gets tough, Bernatelli says. With each passing season, the producer grows less convinced of the Deserted's reality, their basic humanity. They're more like cardboard cutouts, the personas they develop ever more elaborate and yet more predictable. Miley, one of the assistant producers, calls this televolution, the way their personalities hew ever closer to those of previous seasons, other shows, their triumphs, failures, love affairs, and betrayals converging like images in an elevator mirror. And they're happy to do it. No humiliation or discomfort is too much. The sex changers, the mothers who beat their children on camera, the couples who document their divorces, the husbands who screw their secretaries, the wives who screw their trainers, the secretaries who screw their bosses' wives. Hookers turned kindergarten teachers, housewives turned hookers, drug dealers turned Christian marriage counselors. Whole families cooking up publicity stunts in their garages. It's like they're writing it for us, the producer tells Armand over the phone. After last season, Armand was forced into retirement, replaced by a 20-something MBA from finance. Now Armand lives in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. Who taught them to do that, the producer says. You did, says Armand. We both did. They're quiet for a moment, strains of mariachi music coming through the phone. They still serenade in San Miguel, Armand says. The men still stand below their beloved's window and pour out their souls, despite the millions who've done it before. Do you know what happened last night? The producer asks. Ooh, tell me there was a gangbang. Our poet Simon started to recite poetry spontaneously. Shakespeare, for God's sake, the producer says. Well, he is a poet, Armand says. Sure he is, the producer says. How would I know if he's really a poet? How would anyone know? He could be an astrophysicist. He could be a plumber. Well, who on earth would pretend to be a poet, Armand says. I'm just saying, it was supposed to be unpredictable, the producer says. You remember? It was supposed to be about how different people are, about empathy. It's depressing. On his monitors, the faces of the deserted are fading in the dusk. From the interior comes the lonesome howl of a coyote. The sky has cleared to a sad indigo spattered with brilliant stars, constellations never before observed by man or woman, created specially and at great expense with algorithms developed in Cupertino. Look up, the producer says to the monitors, but none of the deserted looks up. The stars had been Miley's idea, an ambitious deal with Pixar that involved points on the show's syndication, making-of rights, and generous advertising for WALL-E 3. If they already know what's expected of them, the producer thinks, why pay consultants to build the perfect cast? You could scoop 10 people off the street, and soon they'd be forming cabals, plotting revenge, making threats, performing fellatio, sobbing on cue. You didn't have to create the deserted. Just give people a chance to express the deserted they already wanted to be. Look up, dumbasses, the producer says, and closes his eyes, squeezing the stone until his forearm aches. When he opens them, there's Gloria Ham, a dental hygienist from Garden City, New York, caught unawares by a sand can as she picks something out of her teeth. She's big-boned, olive-skinned, her face plain and vaguely bored. Her short hair does not blow attractively in the wind. She does not wear sunglasses, cut-off jeans, or a sarong. She does not have sculpted abs or any visible tattoos. Put bluntly, she's nondescript, a dud, just the kind of thing they can't afford. Not this season. Better shape up, kid, the producer says under his breath. What role is Gloria playing? Who has she decided to be? The producer has no idea. But after an eternity, she lets out a sigh and turns away from the others. And while the producer holds his breath, Gloria Ham leans back in the sand and at last lifts her face to the lovely, perilous sky.